Round 9, the Austrian Grand Prix. What a Grand Prix it was, absolute thriller. Even from the Friday we were getting good action, and the Sunday didn't disappoint either. And Max Verstappen didn't disappoint, took the first win not of a Mercedes car this year, and he took it in some style. Verstappen qualifies on the front row alongside Charles Leclerc, two 21-year-olds. You thought, wow, this is interesting. We're going to be in for a really good duel between Verstappen and Leclerc. But immediately as the lights went out, Verstappen makes a reasonable error off the grid. And if we go on board with him, you can just see exactly what went wrong with his start. So from second place, what he needs to do is get the pre-start revs, so get the revs to the right point and consistent revs, around 10,000 RPM. It depends, it changes team to team. Just before the lights go out, on Verstappen's steering wheel, the blue LEDs on the right-hand side just start going into a bit of chaos on the edge. So that shows he's got too many revs on. So he's been fairly constant, and then just before the lights go out, he's crept on a bit of throttle. The LEDs are telling him that, but it's too late to react. Then, probably in a bit of panic, he's also dropped the clutch too far as well. Double whammy, anti-stall, and suddenly second place, and we thought, great race for Verstappen, here we go. It's in a bit of disarray right now because he drops immediately to 7th, and then even Pierre Gasly, his teammate, comes through, and that makes him 8th halfway around turn 1. So what a bad start from a great position, second place, down to 8th in half a lap. And I thought his race was done. I think he probably thought his race was done, but wow, it just wasn't. And the comeback started straight away before the end of lap 1. Coming out of turn 7, Pierre Gasly ahead, his teammate, and Verstappen gets really good drive. Gasly was really tucked in behind Vettel. Verstappen goes to the outside. The two Red Bulls side by side, turn 9, really fast corner. Verstappen leaves his rival room on the inside. Lovely move. Back into 7th place. And a couple of laps later, Verstappen, again, clean move on the inside of Raikkonen at turn 3 as well. So probably the best overtaking place on the circuit, the biggest braking zone, uphill. And then he goes long into the race, Verstappen. And this is crucial because he manages to pit later than his rivals. And he has fresher tyres later on in the Grand Prix. And he has his head down and is absolutely charging from the moment he comes out of the pits. And the first man he encounters now is Sebastian Vettel. Now, Vettel knows that Verstappen is going to attack at turn 3. He sort of keeps defending the middle of the road, but Verstappen's really good off turn 3. He takes an apex that Vettel seems to be missing continually, probably out of choice. Next up, Valtteri Bottas, the Mercedes. Now, if Verstappen's pass on Sebastian Vettel looked quite comfortable, this one was even easier, really. Bottas just held out the white flag, didn't want to defend it at all, just stays right to the left-hand side. Verstappen, easy on the brakes, easy to the apex, easy to the exit, thank you very much. Critically for him, he didn't lose very much time passing both Vettel and Bottas, so he didn't let Charles Leclerc escape out front, and it boiled down to 3 laps. So then the first time Verstappen catches Leclerc now, and he's just getting closer to his rival, up to turn 3, where he's like to do his overtaking today. And Leclerc covers the middle of the road, but if I pause it there, you can see Verstappen's not shown a nose, he's not shown anything, he just sticks to the outside. But at this point, Verstappen will be aware that Leclerc's not covered the inside, he's covered the middle of the road. And next time around, Verstappen takes that opportunity that Leclerc's not covering it. So here we go then, the second attempt, goes to the middle of the road, but this time Verstappen's wiser to it. He's seen this one coming, and he dives late to the inside. Again, doesn't want to show what he's about to do, and he goes for it on the inside, nice and committed on the brakes, good, and then gets on the throttle as best he can, but crucially leaves space for Leclerc. And I bet Verstappen wasn't expecting Charles Leclerc to carry on around the outside of him at this corner, and I also bet Verstappen would be absolutely kicking himself for giving Leclerc the space, because this time around he's actually quite a long way ahead of Leclerc towards the exit of the corner. And it would have been fairly legitimate for him just to sort of squeeze Leclerc off to the outside, because he's only got a front wing really in. But he was very kind to him, to be honest. And Leclerc, still wanting that victory, keeps his foot in on the outside. And they go wheel to wheel down towards turn 4. Great racing for the lead of the Grand Prix with a few laps remaining. This is exactly what we want to see. And here we go, take 3 with Max Verstappen then. Leclerc once again just hovers in the middle, but this one's even less of a defence than the last 2. He's expecting Max to do the same thing, go on the inside and leave the space, but Max, he's thinking differently on this one. He's thinking, no chance, I'm not going to let you go around the outside again. So he goes a little bit deeper on the brakes, he misses the apex, he turns in a bit later, and then he picks up a bit of throttle as well, just to kind of get his car to run a little bit wider. and then crucially just starts to unwind the lock a little bit as well as they get towards the exit, as Leclerc is right there. If I pause, they are wheel to wheel. Leclerc's at least alongside Max Verstappen, but Verstappen knows that if he can just wheel bang his rival off the road, he's going to have the place. So he unwinds the lock slightly, gets on the throttle slightly, and off goes Charles Leclerc.
He turned in on me.
Mate, there was nothing wrong with that, mate. Nothing wrong with it.
For me, the immediacy of Verstappen's radio message as well says that he was a little bit worried about it. It was like straight to the defence rather than just a normal racing move. He was straight covering it to the team, and the team, there was nothing wrong with that one, Max. Now, if you ask me, that's them preempting an investigation. Now, it's a really tough one, and I've looked at this so many times to try and see whether there's a penalty here or not for Verstappen. The rules state that you can't intentionally push another driver off the circuit. So the question is Verstappen's intentions, I think, firstly. Now, I think he's intentionally done it, but there's not a huge amount of evidence to support that. The steering, he is steering a pretty tight line. He does sort of relax the steering a little bit just to put Leclerc towards the outside curb. That's true, he could keep the steering tighter, but I don't think there's necessarily concrete evidence here that Verstappen is not just deeper into the corner. He's braked too late. Leclerc's always going to go wide. So it's a really tough one for the stewards. I would hate to be in their shoes for this Grand Prix. I think they probably called it just about right. I don't think there's concrete evidence either way. We want to see good racing. Leclerc, you can't leave the door that wide open. A few laps to go of the Grand Prix. You've got Verstappen bearing down on you for the win. You cannot wave him through and hope that you're going to get space. He shouldn't have given Verstappen the chance to run him off the road. That one is clear. Verstappen got away with it. Got away with it. Right on the edge, but probably just about acceptable. A couple of other incidents that we should have a look at just to see from the past. Firstly, 2016. The two Mercedes, final lap, same corner. Rosberg ahead, Hamilton's attacking, goes for the outside. And Rosberg picks up a 10-second penalty for this move here. But it's clumsy from Rosberg, this one. It's really, really clumsy. He's a bit behind Hamilton, who's attacking, but then he just simply doesn't turn until way too late. He's running off the road pretty much all on his own, turns way too late, and really is causing a collision as much as forcing another driver off the track. He just drives into the side of Hamilton. So he's probably wanting to do the same as Verstappen did, but he's not done it well at all. It's really clumsy. Verstappen did it in a clever way, and I think Rosberg there misjudged it massively. Another one that was in 2017 now, and this one was penalised. Kevin Magnussen forced Nico Hülkenberg off the road down at turn 2. Similar incident, Hülkenberg's around the outside, and they're sort of side by side. Hülkenberg's maybe marginally ahead. This is a very subtle difference, but he's maybe marginally ahead, and Magnussen puts him off out wide. The rest is history for that one.
Once again, most unsportive driver of the yeah, you're really good, man.
One final example is myself and Fernando Alonso, 2017 at Spa. Now this is the very next race after Magnussen's got his penalty for forcing Hülkenberg off. And I'm attacking Fernando Alonso into Les Combes, top of the hill, and we give each other just about enough space. It's really borderline. Through the first one, Fernando goes actually technically off, but there's a little bit of space. The next one, I'm right on the edge, but there's a little bit of space. And then we get down the hill and the battle's done because we're side by side, and then I basically just get absolutely shoved off by Fernando Alonso there. No penalty for him. There was a penalty the race before. There was inconsistencies back then, and we had about an hour meeting at the next race to discuss it. The thing that I don't like about forcing another driver off the track, I don't think that is pure racing. For me, what we saw the lap before, Verstappen and Leclerc wheel to wheel through a number of corners, that's what we want to see. That's better racing than just the driver on the inside gets to a position and then forces the one on the outside off. And the term, it was his corner, he earned the corner. Not really, not just by being on the inside of it. I think the racing could be really improved by drivers just giving each other space, which Verstappen ultimately didn't do. There's a really fine line. The wording of the rules needs to be really looked at, and it needs to be clear to the drivers. But that was the race done, and overall, I have to say, unbelievable drive from Verstappen. He passed 6 cars from 8th on the first lap to winning the Grand Prix. 6 cars on track. So a fantastic Grand Prix, overtakes throughout the field, a Red Bull beating a Ferrari right at the death. Where were Mercedes? Really off the pace weekend for Mercedes. They won all 8 of the first Grand Prix, arrived in Austria and never really looked like they had the pace to match, certainly Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. They got themselves into a really good position at the start because of Vettel's qualifying woes, Verstappen's bad start. They were second and third, the two Mercedes, and I thought, here we go. They're going to put pressure on Leclerc, and this is Mercedes in a great position to try and do something. Bottas just didn't really have the pace in Austria. He was struggling, and even in the first stint, couldn't put Charles Leclerc under any pressure. He pitted, Leclerc covered him. For me, Leclerc pitted too early. Ferrari didn't need to cover Valtteri Bottas at that point. They had 5 seconds, and Bottas had a slow pit stop. So that made Leclerc's tyres a little bit worse at the end because I think he pitted too early. Hamilton at that point was the threat, but Hamilton damaged his front wing, went over the curbs. This was another feature of the Austrian weekend. The circuit, big curbs, you go over them, you damage your car, and Hamilton did that, damaged his front wing, and had about a 10-second pit stop, lost a lot of time, and from then on Mercedes were really struggling with cooling. And Austria circuit with a bit of altitude, you get less airflow over the car, the temperatures go really high. They were having to do a lot of lifting coast to try and just get their cars to the end. So a random bad weekend for Mercedes, maybe. The circuit characteristics definitely didn't help them, but what it did show is when Mercedes aren't on the ball, we get an absolute thrill of a race between Red Bull and Ferrari. Back to good old-fashioned racing. McLaren, really strong weekend in Austria, backing up a really strong weekend in France as well. Lando Norris again starting 5th, showing a lot of potential. Lights go out, Verstappen's really slow away. Actually, Hamilton gets a little bit caught out with that as well, and Norris just sweeps around the outside. Really nice move here from Lando Norris at the start, but inevitably Hamilton's got a bit more speed in his McLaren and he's going to come through. But it was nice to see Lando Norris giving it a go on the first lap. They went wheel to wheel through turn 3 as well, and then he ended up losing a place to Kimi Raikkonen in all this. So he lost out to Raikkonen at the start, and 13 laps later he's right back on the tail of Kimi Raikkonen. And this is a lovely move from Lando Norris, really committed, good bit of closing speed and just went for it on the brakes, down the inside. He had to pass Daniel Ricciardo as well, but Ricciardo did not make this one easy for Norris at all. In the end, Norris managed to get good drive out of turn 3 and did the outside line towards turn 4, got it done pretty much on the straight. But then there was a really interesting team radio where Norris engineer saying, if you can, keep Ricciardo within a second.
Lando, if you can, just hold Ricciardo in your DRS. Hold him to allow him to have DRS as long as he can't pass you. In like forever?
This was to try and allow Ricciardo to defend more easily from Gasly behind, who was putting the pressure on Norris in the grand scheme of the race. Quite a bonkers team radio message, to be honest. Ricciardo's not the sort of guy you want to back into and give a sniff of an overtake to in the first place, but for Norris in the cockpit, it's so difficult to judge whether basically the engineer is saying don't let him get close enough to pass you, but within a second. So you've got to judge at that point sort of 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 of a second. Really not possible for Norris to do this without giving Ricciardo a sniff at some point of overtaking. Norris sort of was quite confused, I think, by the radio message himself, and it was quite funny to hear him say that. Norris's teammate Carlos Sainz, brilliant drive in Austria. He's been quietly doing a very good job at McLaren as well, took an engine penalty and had to start from the back of the field and finished up well into the points. Sainz basically made so many overtakes, all on the outside. Love the outside in Austria. Normally, I said, the inside's the conventional, get to the inside and you can muscle your rival wide. Sainz didn't need that, straight to the outside. All in all, brilliant drive from him from the back, and it went relatively unseen because there was so much drama at the front. For Carlos Sainz, this was really good, and bringing home some good points from McLaren.